From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Hey, good morning and welcome to our first Georgia Vote since the race for the White House reaches its historic ending. The road to the presidency came straight through our state right here in Georgia.
Yes, it did. Both the Harris and the Trump campaigns blitzed the state in the closing days. And in the end, Georgia and the nation's key swing states, they tilted Republican, making Donald Trump once again President-elect Trump. He delivered his victory speech a few hours after midnight on election night in Florida. Mr. Trump was joined by his wife Melania, his children, and other family and supporters. It was a decisive victory for Republicans, who also took control of the United States Senate.
I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor. That's what it is.
Trump's victory made history. He's the second ever president to win 2 non-consecutive terms, the other being President Grover Cleveland back in 1892. Mr. Trump is also on track to be the first Republican to win the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. And at 78, he would be the oldest person elected president. Joe Biden, currently the oldest sitting president. And Donald Trump is the first person elected president who was found guilty of felony crimes, convicted in May in a New York hush money case. Many Republican lawmakers offered their congratulations to Mr. Trump, among them Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Mr. Trump has in the past criticized Kemp, particularly after Joe Biden narrowly won Georgia in 2020. But eventually, Trump made his support of the popular swing state governor a staple of his campaign stops, particularly here. And in a post to X on Wednesday, Governor Kemp said, quote, "We look forward to working together to put hardworking Americans first and get our country back on track."
Yeah, and later in the day, Vice President Harris offered her concession from her alma mater, Washington, D.C.'s Howard University. She told her backers to continue fighting for their vision of the country, even in the wake of sweeping rejection at the ballot box. Harris says this is not the outcome that she hoped for, but she says she's proud of her campaign.
Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future.
The vice president says she plans to work with President-elect Trump and his team to ensure a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. Now, just hours after the networks called the race for Donald Trump, we hit the streets of Atlanta to get your reaction.
I don't think it's acceptable that so many people think that what Trump is doing and what he wants to do is okay, but I also don't know what I can do about it.
I think there's a lot of potential, so hopefully we can get some of the poison out of our food, get some of the budget out of the government, make things more efficient, make things better. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Everybody who didn't vote, you should have voted. That's all I have to say.
Kind of scary. Just think that a lot of people believe that he's like appointed by God and stuff like that, and I'm just not really in agreement with that.
People I've talked to, that's who they seem. They're not really happy with where everything is right now. That kind of feels like kind of was 4 years ago, with COVID. People aren't happy. They want change. My guess happens again in 4 years, changes again.
You can watch the full post-election remarks from President-elect Donald Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris, and President Joe Biden right now on 11 Alive Plus. It's free to download on your streaming device. Just search 11 Alive on your Roku, Amazon Fire, or Apple TV device. And it is a historic comeback for Donald Trump here in Georgia, flipping the state from blue back to red.
And it also marks a dramatic reversal of his 2020 results here. Trump lost the state 4 years ago by the narrowest of margins, less than 12,000 votes, propelling Joe Biden to the White House. This time, a very different story. Mr. Trump carrying Georgia by more than 100,000 votes. We talked with two political experts, one Democrat, one Republican, both regular guests here on the Georgia Vote, about what happened and what it means for their parties.
Relief and a lot of validation.
Remarkable, honestly. And shocking, because we had gone in thinking it was going to be a much closer horse race than it really turned out to be.
Fal Sabak, a Democratic strategist, and Spiro Amburn, a Republican strategist, reacting to a dramatic election night in Georgia. What worked for Republicans in Georgia this cycle?
Turnout. Donald Trump expanded those margins in rural counties. He shaved Joe Biden's margins from 2020.
Amburn arguing the race came down to two key issues.
It was the economy and public safety.
Democrats now begin the process of trying to make sense of a stinging loss in a state they hoped to carry. What went wrong for Democrats in Georgia this year?
We knew that women were going to come out in full force. I think just hitting them with just the abortion talking point might have not gotten them to where we needed them to be, which was to vote for us.
But Sabak cautions just hours after the race was called, it's still too early to point to one singular tipping point.
It's not just one factor is going to get you to 50%. You have to have a bunch of different variables.
For Republicans, now their attention turns to Inauguration Day and what happens next.
Trump has to govern. I think he has a golden opportunity.
And while Mr. Trump did carry Georgia decisively this year, we are still a closely divided state. With about 99% of results reported, the former president and now projected president-elect looks to carry Georgia by about 2%. And even with record turnout ahead of Tuesday, the race was called here in Georgia at 12:35 a.m. Wednesday. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says this was a result in part of having millions of mostly early votes processed within about 4 hours of polls closing.
Yeah, on Tuesday night, the secretary emphasized an efficient count was a priority for his office.
But at the end of the day, if you look at what we did and accomplished in Georgia, I want you to think and ask yourself, what other state in America actually had today an average 3-minute wait time that got as low as 1 minute for many periods of the day? What other state in the country had a 49-second check-in time so that you had end up with less than a 5-minute wait time during the whole process, and you're voting in and out the door in 10 minutes, things like that? I can't think of another one. I know of no other one, and neither do you.
Yeah, so the First Network called the national race for Donald Trump around 2 a.m. Wednesday. This is much quicker than 4 years ago. In 2020, it took 4 days to call the race as the country waited for Pennsylvania to finish counting mail-in ballots. On a Saturday morning 4 years ago, President Joe Biden was officially declared the winner. Compare that to back in 2012, which was actually one of the fastest results. 12 minutes after the last polls closed in the U.S., networks called the race for Barack Obama over Mitt Romney. The longest wait for a presidential winner in modern times, that came back in 2000. It was the year of the hanging chads in Florida that left the fate of the race to the Supreme Court. 36 days later, the justices stopped the recount. Republican George W. Bush won the Electoral College and presidency, even though Democrat Al Gore won the popular vote. Well, once again, Georgia was in the presidential spotlight. Coming up, we will dive in deeper into the state's role in Donald Trump's victory with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Washington correspondent, Tia Mitchell.
And later, our first voice of the voter after Tuesday's election shares what he hopes will happen now that Donald Trump is headed back to the White House. Stay with us. Welcome back into the Georgia Vote. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris made a combined 23 visits to Georgia this past year, crisscrossing Metro Atlanta and other parts of the state. In the end, it is Trump taking the 16 electoral votes of Georgia on his way to winning a second term as president. Joining us now for perspective and analysis on the election is Tia Mitchell, the Washington correspondent of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia, welcome.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
And co-host of Politically Georgia. We are so happy that you're here. Tia, I want to start by asking you this. You saw the campaign trail from Iowa all the way to Macon. You've seen so many different voters. My question for you, From your point of view, did Democrats get out-campaigned, or are people just over or just not happy with the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think that, the campaign, to think where we started in Iowa with Biden being the kind of leading nominee, if you will, and really the only nominee for the Democratic side. In Iowa, you still had Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, and of course Trump eventually prevailed. But I think when we got down to it, when it was Trump versus Harris, Trump had a very clear message. And Harris had a pretty clear message too. And I think voters made a choice. And, we'll continue to unpack what those choices were, what those choices mean, what the choices tell us about who has the political power in America and what they hope to do with it. But I think really at the end of the day, voters chose Trump. There were and on the Harris camp, some of it was anti-Trump, some of it was pro-democracy, pro-Democrat, and some of it was pro-Harris. But Trump got votes for him, for his message.
And you're talking about a real decisive victory for former president, now President-elect Trump, and also many other Republicans. What does this decisive Republican victory mean for the legislative agenda in D.C.? And I'm particularly eager for your insight here because this is the beat that you cover.
Yeah, I do think, we don't know yet what the House is going to turn out, but Republicans are in the driver's seat to control the House, the Senate, and the White House. If so, we expect them to move quickly to implement Trump's agenda. Now, if Democrats are able to eke out a slim majority in the House, they're still going to have to work with Republicans. It won't be quite the Trump agenda because Democrats will be able to stop it. But at the end of the day, the White House kind of leads, and it still is going to be Trump being able to say what he would like Congress to do.
Tia, I want to bring things back here to Georgia and looking ahead to 2026, because that's what Democrats are now kind of putting their focus on, regrouping. Looking ahead this week on Politically Georgia, you all discussed the possibility of Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones throwing in his hat in 2026. We've heard inklings that Lucy McBath might do that. Who's on your short list? Who are you looking at right now?
And that could be Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. That could be Lucy McBath, both running for governor. All of those statewide races, even Secretary of State, Raffensperger, I think is term limited. So it's going to be a lot to see what happens in 2026.
And I think we have just about 30 seconds left, Tia. Quickly here, in the years between now and 2026, what kind of role do you anticipate in Congress for folks like Representative Mike Collins, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are really prominent fixtures in President Trump's campaign this cycle? Yeah,
so we don't know if Marjorie Taylor Greene might be seeking a role in the Trump administration. She said, for example, she would like to be the Homeland Security Secretary over border security. But if she leaves Congress, we actually might see a new member of Congress in Georgia's delegation to fill her seat. But people like Mike Collins have indicated they're going to run for leadership positions within Congress. Andrew Clyde could have more of a voice. He's pretty conservative, but he's been showing up. Brian Jack, the newest member of Georgia's delegation, worked for Trump in Trump's White House. We expect him to be a leading voice as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We want to talk to you for so much more time. We are time limited right now, but hopefully we'll have you back, Tia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still ahead, we hear from the voice of the voter, but first, Republican communications strategist Stephen Lawson and Palante Georgia co-founder and chair Humberto Garcia Segram look ahead to the next administration in our Politics Roundtable. Time now for our political roundtable. Today we have Humberto Garcia Segram, the co-founder and chair of Palante Georgia, and Republican communication strategist Stephen Lawson, both returning panelists. Welcome back, gentlemen. First, I want to get your initial thoughts from the election. Humberto, we'll start with you.
Well, shocker. I mean, what I was telling friends going into it was, it's likely going to be close, but there's a chance Harris will win in a big way, and that certainly didn't happen.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think it was a resounding rejection of the last 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. When you look at the economy, when you look at inflation, cost of living, the border situation, you go down and down the list, and I think really it was just a ticking time bomb for Democrats. And I think Tuesday night was very eye-opening for a lot of people.
And Stephen, you have lots of experience in Georgia Republican politics. This is a decisive win for Republicans here in our state and around the country. What does the results of Tuesday night's election, what does that mean for the Georgia Republican Party moving forward?
I think for the Georgia Republican Party and Republicans at large, it means we've got to get to work. We have to get to work delivering on the things that we promised on the campaign trail in terms of lowering costs, securing the border, instilling strength on a world stage. We've got to deliver. The American people are looking, they're listening, and that's what they expect. And with a unified government, now is the time to do that.
Yeah. Humberto, I want to ask you this. I mean, Democrats are saying that, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking here, they have to take a step back, reassess what went wrong. In your opinion, what do you think they could have done better? What did they get wrong here?
Look, I mean, it's so early, and we need time to really digest and understand and look at the data. But really, to echo what Steve was saying, we were carrying some baggage, A, and B, I think we, to some degree, we're simply clearly out of touch. And we need to look ourselves in the mirror first, and then we need to go out and engage and listen and talk to folks and perhaps be less arrogant and be more willing to consider, you know, other positions. I mean, my view is we need to change.
I want to just follow up quickly here. A lot of people saying that this was a election based on the cost of goods, the economy. But of course, there are still some moral issues at stake. Humberto, how do you feel about that specifically? And I ask because I know that you have some tight connections here.
Yeah, look, I'll share two quick things. One, I have a transgender daughter, and so we look at this through that lens. And frankly, what I would say about that is simply that the fear-mongering was absurd. And these issues are not black and white. And we don't make the effort to think about them deeply enough. And I think if we do it, and when we will, we will get to a better place for everyone. Second thing is, what I fear is we've embraced, or some folks at least seem to be embracing, a culture of toxic masculinity. And I shared something on social media a few days before the election, and what I was getting from some folks in my feed is, well, that's just how men talk on the golf course. That's what they're talking about. That's not how I talk about women. That's not how my friends talk about women. And I sure hope if you're a man and you have a daughter or a sister, that you don't talk about that way either, because they will be talking about your daughter or your sister that way. It's not okay. And so that's my concern going in. Now, we'll see what happens.
And on that note, Humberto, I hate to cut you off, but Stephen, I want to make sure you have a chance to weigh in here too. What do the next 2 years look like with a Republican, some would say a mandate in Washington? Does a new Trump administration lean into the social issues that were a cornerstone of his campaign rallies? Or does it lean into some of the pocketbook issues that were another cornerstone of the rallies?
I think it's got to be kitchen table issues. I think that's what Americans are feeling right now. That's where they're hurting. This was a change election. Donald Trump was elected on changing the direction of the country in terms of a more secure country, a safer country where goods are less expensive. We've got to deliver on that because 2026 is right around the corner.
And an election in 2026
Indeed.
as well.
Yeah.
One sentence from each of you. Who do you expect to be running here in Georgia for governor in 2026? One sentence. Stephen, you first.
A lot of people, I think Burt Jones is at the top of the list right now.
Humberto?
10 seconds, Humberto.
A lot of people.
A lot of people. Those are short sentences, and that's exactly what we asked for.
We'll see in 2026.
A lot to talk about, a lot to make sense of, and a lot of nuance that we expect from you guys, and we get it every week.
Thank you.
Right now, when we come back, we will head to an auto repair shop in Gwinnett County to hear from our voice of the voter about what is driving his optimism now that the election is over. Well, the election is now over, but our mission to keep everyday Georgians at the center of the political conversation never stops. Now, as always, you can't have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters. This week, we spent some time with Arturo Robles at the auto shop he runs in Lawrenceville. We talked about what drove his vote this year and what he hopes happens in a new Trump administration.
We need to change the AC condenser, the radiator. This is 88 Auto Body Shop. We started this business in 2016.
You make it look easy.
It's not.
What's the secret to making a business like this work?
To be honest, the tools, the paint is very important. But the best important is the people that you have around you.
So we just had a big election. When you were going to cast your ballot this year, what were you most worried about?
First, for the country, I need to do the election what I think is the best for USA. And that would include all the world. We need a leader. The result is according to what I want.
You were happy to see Donald Trump win this race?
No happy. I'm so happy, extremely happy. I was born in Cuba, but I live in Venezuela. I'm a Venezuelan citizen. And when we check what happened there, that many kids die because don't have medicine, don't have nothing, and they have another part that go to the very expensive place, but that one represents the 5 or 6%, 7% of all the country.
You were afraid of seeing what happened in Venezuela happen here.
Yes. Maybe will not be in the next few years, but the way that it's running is like that. Another very important, I think that every person that come here for immigration, and I think the state need to check the background for each person. The bad person that is not good to us, go back. You cannot be here.
And you say that as an immigrant yourself.
Yeah.
When you heard Donald Trump's message about immigration, when you heard him talk about securing the border,
yes,
you like that.
I love that.
We always end with this. What are you most optimistic about?
A lot. And I really feel that the economies will be better.
And Robles says he came to the United States from Venezuela in 2007, became a U.S. citizen around 2012. In addition to the economy and immigration, he told me his opposition to abortion and concern about ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine influenced his support for Donald Trump.
A very interesting conversation. Zach, thanks so much for bringing it to us. And thank you all so much for watching us today. We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.